This book, I was reading it during my exams and I literally stayed up till 5 a.m. This next book has everything in it. This next book was a roller coaster of emotion. The second book, I finished reading it in one sitting. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Thea and today I'm going to be showing you my favorite reads of all time. The best books that I've ever read, and these will always have a very special place in my heart. So yeah, without delay, let's get into it. So the first book that I want to talk about, this book, I was reading it during my exams and I literally stayed up till 5 a.m. just to finish it. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and that is Rebecca. I'm holding it upside down. So this is like the cover, it's embossed and everything. It's a special edition cover and I love it, and this is the outside of it. So yeah, it's the best book I've ever read. So just to give you a little bit of a brief of what the story is, it's basically about this very wealthy man called Matson de Winter, and he owns this big old English mansion by the ocean and everything, and it's the most beautiful place ever. So basically he marries this girl Rebecca, but she ends up dying at that property at Manderley. And then, you know, almost like less than a year later, he marries his second wife. And the entire book is written from her perspective, the second wife's perspective. And it's like, you know, she comes to Manderley and she finds out about Rebecca and like who she is and what happened to her, and all of that just sort of unfolds. And it's honestly brilliant. I have to say, like, the book in the beginning is kind of a little boring. It's very descriptive. But the more you get into it, like especially when our main character, the second wife, comes to Manderley, everything picks up so quickly. It gets so interesting, and then it just keeps getting better and better and better. Like by the end, I was literally dying. I was having physical reactions. I was gasping out loud, and I just could not put the book away. Okay, so this second book, I finished reading it in one sitting, literally one sitting, and that is Animal Farm. I'm holding it upside down again. So, I mean, yeah, that's not much of an accomplishment because it's literally such a small book, but this is genuinely one of the best books I've ever read. George Orwell is one of my favorite authors. This book, Animal Farm, was specifically written about the Russian Revolution. So it's kind of like, you know, when you're trying to explain something to a kid, you use like animal examples and just like, you know, simplify it as much as you can. It's kind of like that. So it's the Russian Revolution, but as if you're explaining it to a child. So you're talking about like in terms of animals, and it's honestly, it's so easy to understand, it's so easy to read, and I love that about his books. All these very heavy concepts and ideas and, you know, these difficult topics to understand, he's put them into such simple and beautiful stories. This is again a book that I would give anything to read for the first time again, and it's just, you have to read Animal Farm. You cannot not have read Animal Farm. You have to read it. So yeah. Okay, this next book has everything in it. It literally has everything. It has romance, it has feminism, it's about struggle, so there's like war in it as well. It has everything. And that book is Independence by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. So again, to give you like a brief, it's about so this book is set in the time period when India is becoming independent. So it's like the transfer of power from the British government to the Indian government. So it's like during that transition period, and that was honestly a really horrible time for India. It shows like how basic, like normal general civilians were affected by the whole transfer and that transition time. It's brilliant. So this book is about three sisters who live like in a very small village in Bengal, and as soon as like their father dies, their entire lives change. And even if they're sisters, all of them are so different. Like the youngest one is like, she's headstrong, she wants to become a doctor, she's a career woman type of woman. And then like the middle sister, she is more of like a family woman, like she wants to get married and have kids and everything. And the oldest one, she, you know, is like forbidden love. So it has everything, and it's just so amazing. Like the way this author writes women is so good, because she doesn't present them like in a good light always, you know, like she writes about those flaws, their mistakes, and their character arcs, like how they improve over time, and just she writes them as humans, and I love that. Like, it's a very hopeful book as well, because, you know, like in such bad conditions, such bad circumstances, there are people who would help you, and, you know, who keep those like tiny differences apart, and in the end it doesn't really matter. And the ending, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's kind of like underwhelming and overwhelming at the same time. Like, the ending is definitely not what you would expect, and honestly, like, it kind of like leaves you in pain because you want more, like you're just not ready to accept that end, and just like it's painful, the end, but it's honestly an amazing book, and it's feminist, and it's genuinely really good. It's very well written. Okay, so this next book was a roller coaster of emotions. I physically cried while reading this book, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce the name of the author right, but Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Hopefully that was right. So again, to give you a little brief, it's actually, the concept of this book is so unique. So it's about a time traveling cafe, basically. It's this small, very small cafe in Japan where if you sit in this one seat, you get to go back in time. So you get to go into the past. But there are many rules and conditions. It's not as simple. It's like, you know, when you go back, you cannot leave the seat that you are in the cafe. So you cannot leave the cafe, so it has to be in the cafe. And, you know, you have like a time restriction, and there are a lot of those things. But it's such a sad book. It's so sad, and it's so beautiful. Genuinely, this book is such, like, it's written so beautifully. It's like a winter read, you know, where it's like a very dull day, and you just like bundle up yourself, and you have like a cup of hot chocolate or hot coffee if you want, and it's just one of those reads that just warms you up from the inside but makes you cry at the same time. All the stories in it, so it's kind of like it's stories of multiple people, and all those stories are sad, to be really honest, but it's genuinely such an amazing book, and everyone has to read this book. It's amazing. It went popular over Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, everywhere, because it deserves it. It's definitely not overhyped. In fact, I think it might be a little underhyped. It's the most beautiful book ever. Like, in terms of, you know, writing, it's genuinely the most beautiful. So yeah. Okay, so for this last book, now this book is the story of Mahabharata, which is an Indian epic, but the entire story is from the point of view of a woman, and that is The Palace of Illusions by the same author who wrote Independence that we talked about earlier, and who is Chitra Banerjee Devakuni, and I don't think I'm pronouncing her name right either, but I genuinely love her, and that's why 2 of her books are in my top 5. Because this is it's like, in terms of writing, because it's literally by the same author, it's very similar to Independence. Like, the way she writes women, I will never get over it. So basically, this entire book, Palace of Illusions, is written in the point of view of Draupadi. If you don't already know the Mahabharata, she is a very prominent woman throughout the story. But see, this is the thing. So even as a kid, when I was told the story of Mahabharata multiple times, you know, like, women were never actually in the story. They just came and went as, like, according to the male leads, how it affected the life of the male leads. Like, they were just like sort of side characters, and they were never a prominent part of the story. And that was always so, like, to be honest, as a kid, you know, I never really questioned it, because as a kid you just accept what you're given. But then when I heard about this book, I was like, okay, and I started to point out all those things, and I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, women were never really talked about in such a big and important piece of literature. So she definitely did a really good job. And, you know, even though she wrote the entire, like, epic from a different perspective, like from such a different perspective that I've honestly never heard about, the story in itself, she managed to keep it very pure and just as it was. Because there are many renditions of Mahabharata, like many small things happen differently, but she managed to, like, keep the essence of the story just as it is, even though the perspective completely changed, which I love. So the entire story is written from the perspective of Draupadi, And to be honest, like the way she wrote Draupadi, I don't think I agree with her all like at all times. With Draupadi, not the author. Because I feel like, you know, so in the past, women were always expected to be very submissive, you know, like just go along with what is happening and never question anything and always be very forgiving and just, you know, like basically very delicate and just, you know, just very submissive, as I said. But Draupadi is not like that. She is very vengeful. She wants revenge for everything. She doesn't let things go. And she's like a very strong woman, and she doesn't agree with everything. Like she will, you know, she's against everything that is set for women, and I love that. She goes against it. Like she's so brave to actually go against it. But she ends up doing a lot of things that she regrets, which also like such a huge part of life. Like she's not shown to be this perfect person who always makes the right decision and who has no flaws whatsoever. No, she makes many wrong decisions which she ends up regretting, and her choices are like are like very questionable a lot of the times. But so, and that's why I don't agree with every decision she makes, but that's what it's about. That it's about her, it's not about anybody else, it's about her. And it's just how it is, you know. We make wrong decisions sometimes because of our ego. Like she has a really big ego, but that's why it's so good, because she's not shown to be like every other woman. She's, or you know how women were expected to be then. She's shown to have her own personality. She's shown to be rebellious, and that's what I love about this book. And it's generally, it took me such a long time to read it. Like I did not expect it would take me that long to read it. I mean, it is the entire story of Mahabharata, but I really didn't expect that it would take me that much time to finish that book, but it did. So, but it was really worth it because it was such an amazing book. It was an amazing read, and it was a difficult read as well, because a lot of the times I didn't agree with everything, and a lot of the times I was like, like, not like that, but that's just how it is. And I had a lot of fun reading it, and I hope you do too. You should definitely read it. It's an amazing book as well. Guys, so yes guys, that's it. These are my best books that I've ever read, my top 5 books. Actually, there are more, but you know, for future videos. So if you want more videos, comment down below. And yeah, remember to like and subscribe and tell me how you like these books. If you go ahead and read them, or if you've already read them, your review of the book, please leave it down in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it, and bye bye, see you next time.